It was a calm Saturday evening when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez walked into a luxury hotel restaurant with her husband. She had no security detail, no photographers, just a woman hoping for a quiet dinner after a long week. Wearing a simple summer dress and minimal makeup, she looked like any ordinary guest. But that simplicity was exactly what led to one of the most shocking moments in that restaurant's history. As she sat at a corner table, a young waiter approached, frowning slightly. He looked her up and down, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Ma'am, this section is for premium guests only," he said. "You might want to move to the cafe area downstairs." Alexandria smiled politely. "Oh, I actually have a reservation here." But the waiter rolled his eyes. "Sure you do," he muttered under his breath and walked away. Her husband leaned forward. "Do you want me to say something?" She shook her head gently. "No need. Let's just eat." Her calmness was unshakable, but the disrespect didn't stop there. A few minutes later, the same waiter returned with a glass of water. But instead of setting it down gently, he flung it onto the table, splashing Alexandria's dress. A gasp spread across the room. Other diners turned to watch. Her husband immediately stood up, anger flashing in his eyes, but Alexandria placed a hand on his arm. "It's all right," she said softly. She picked up a napkin and began dabbing the water from her dress, maintaining the same calm expression that had carried her through countless political storms. The waiter smirked, thinking he had intimidated her. He whispered to another server, probably one of those wannabe influencers, "She'll leave soon." The arrogance in his tone made even his co-workers uncomfortable. Alexandria and her husband quietly continued their meal. Every eye in the restaurant was on them, some in pity, some in curiosity. No one yet realized who they were looking at. Engagement moment. What would you do if someone disrespected you like this in public? Stay calm like Alexandria, or speak up immediately. Tell me in the comments below. I'm reading your thoughts. Then, about 15 minutes later, everything changed. The hotel manager entered the dining room, greeting guests politely until he spotted Alexandria. His smile froze. "Ma'am, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. I didn't know you were dining with us tonight." The waiter froze mid-step, his face draining of color. "See, Congresswoman," he stammered. Whispers filled the restaurant. Cameras were quietly lifted. People began murmuring her name. "That's her. That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez." But the biggest shock was yet to come. The manager turned toward Alexandria's husband and extended a respectful handshake. "Sir, I didn't expect to see you either. Your properties have been performing exceptionally well this quarter." The waiter blinked in confusion. "Your properties?" he repeated. The manager looked at him, surprised. "You don't know? Mr. Ocasio is one of the principal owners of this hotel chain." The room fell silent. The waiter's eyes widened in horror. He had just humiliated the owners of the very place he worked in. Alexandria's husband leaned back calmly, his voice measured. "Yes, and we make sure our staff treat every guest with dignity, not arrogance." The waiter's lip trembled. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know. I didn't mean." But Alexandria interrupted gently. "That's exactly the lesson here," she said. "You should treat everyone with respect whether you know them or not." Her voice wasn't angry. It was calm, powerful, and full of grace. The waiter lowered his head, ashamed. The entire restaurant sat in stunned silence, realizing they'd just witnessed something special, not a scandal, but a masterclass in humility. Do you think Alexandria did the right thing by forgiving him, or should he have been fired immediately? Type forgive or fire in the comments below. The manager offered to move them to the VIP suite and replace the waiter on the spot, but Alexandria refused. "We're fine here," she said. "Let's just finish our meal." Her words carried more authority than any order could. Later that night, the story went viral online. Dozens of diners had recorded the moment, the splash, the reveal, the quiet forgiveness. Within hours, headlines read, "Waiter disrespects Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, learns the hard way who she really is." Millions watched, sharing the clip with captions like "Grace under pressure" and "Power meets humility." The hotel released an official statement the next morning. "We sincerely apologize to Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and her husband. The employee involved has undergone retraining, thanks to their request for understanding instead of punishment." When reporters asked Alexandria why she chose to forgive, she smiled and said, "Because respect isn't about who's on top. It's about who chooses kindness when they have power to do otherwise." That single line went viral, to quoted across social media, printed on posters, turned into inspiration reels everywhere. And so, what began as an act of rudeness turned into a global reminder that character isn't shown when you are treated kindly, it is revealed when you face disrespect with dignity. If you believe every person deserves respect no matter how they look, speak, or dress, type respect in the comments and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. The clinking of glasses and the murmur of expensive conversations filled the grand dining room. The chandeliers glowed softly, reflecting off polished marble tables and crystal plates. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sat quietly in her corner seat, a linen napkin neatly folded on her lap. She had come for one simple reason: to enjoy dinner with her husband after weeks of public meetings and interviews. She didn't want to be treated like a politician or a celebrity tonight, just a woman enjoying an evening out. But not everyone saw her that way. The waiter assigned to her table was young, sharp-tongued, and impatient. He had already judged her the moment she walked in. The modest floral dress, the simple sandals, the lack of designer jewelry, everything about her, to him, screamed ordinary. He carried a tall glass of water and approached the table with a forced smile. "Here's your water," he said flatly. Alexandria glanced up politely. "Thank you." And then, without warning, the waiter's wrist flicked. The glass tilted just enough for cold water to spill directly onto her lap. It wasn't an accident. The motion was too sharp, too deliberate. A collective gasp rose from nearby tables. The water dripped down the side of the linen cloth, forming a dark patch on her light dress. For 2 long seconds, the room froze. Then her husband stood. "Hey, what was that supposed to be?" he demanded, voice firm. The waiter pretended to look confused. "Oh, I guess my hand slipped. Sorry." His tone carried no apology, only arrogance. Alexandria placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm. "It's all right," she whispered. "Please sit." He hesitated, his jaw tight. "Al, that wasn't an accident. I know," she said softly, her voice calm as still water. "But if we react with anger, we'll only make a scene." The waiter rolled his eyes and turned away, muttering, "Some people can't take a mistake." Every table nearby watched silently. The diner's wealthy travelers, executives, couples celebrating anniversaries shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Some recognized her face but couldn't believe what they were seeing. Wasn't that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez? The one who spoke about equality and dignity? Alexandria dabbed at the wet spot with her napkin. The water was cold, the humiliation colder, but her expression never changed. No anger, no outrage, just calm. Her husband exhaled sharply, trying to contain his frustration. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. "I'll get the manager." But again, she stopped him. "Let's just see where this goes," she said, half smiling. Sometimes silence teaches louder than shouting. The waiter came back a minute later, smirking as if proud of himself. "Ready to order?" he asked. "Yes," Alexandria said pleasantly, as though nothing had happened. "We'll have the house special, please." The waiter scribbled the order without making eye contact. "Sure," he said, walking away with exaggerated confidence. The murmurs around the restaurant grew louder. One woman whispered, "If that's really her, that guy's in serious trouble." Another replied, "I don't think he knows who she is." Alexandria's husband chuckled under his breath. "If only he knew." She smiled. "It doesn't matter who we are. Respect should be the same either way." Minutes passed. The couple talked quietly, trying to focus on their evening. But the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. Every few moments, the waiter glanced over from across the room, laughing with another server. They could see him pointing subtly in their direction. Her husband clenched his fists. "He's still mocking us." Alexandria stirred her water glass gently, the ice clinking. "People reveal themselves fastest when they think no one's watching," she said. "Let him talk." When the food finally arrived, the same waiter placed the plates with a loud clack, enough to draw glances from nearby tables again. He didn't even say, "Enjoy your meal." Then he walked off, snickering under his breath. Still, Alexandria began eating as if nothing had happened. Every move she made was deliberate, calm, collected, unbothered. She wasn't just eating dinner. She was sending a message. Across the room, whispers turned into conversations. Someone finally recognized her clearly. "That is her," a guest whispered to his wife. "That's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What's she doing here without security?" The wife replied, "Maybe that's why she didn't react. She doesn't need to prove anything." The waiter, however, was still unaware of the storm building quietly around him. He leaned against the counter, joking with another staff member. You see that lady? Acting like she belongs here. Bet she's just trying to get attention for a discount. People like that come here all the time. His co-worker frowned. You might want to be careful, man. Something about her seems familiar. He laughed. Relax. If she were anyone important, she wouldn't let me splash her like that. Meanwhile, at the table, Alexandria's husband checked his phone and sighed. This could have been such a nice night, he said. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It still can be, she replied. Sometimes the best moments come after the worst behavior. The waiter returned one last time to ask if everything was all right. His tone dripped with sarcasm. Everything to your liking, ma'am. Alexandria looked up, met his eyes, and smiled gently. Yes, she said. Everything's perfect. Thank you. Something in her calmness made him hesitate. For a brief second, guilt flickered across his face, but pride pushed it away. He turned and walked off, unaware that his night was about to take a dramatic turn. The restaurant lights shimmered, conversations resumed, and the sound of cutlery echoed softly. But beneath that surface calm, a quiet reckoning was approaching, one that would teach the young waiter a lesson he'd never forget. Have you ever been judged unfairly by how you looked or where you came from? Share your experience below and tell me which city or country you're watching this from. Let's see how far this story travels. The restaurant buzzed with quiet tension. Plates clinked, glasses gleamed, but eyes kept drifting toward the corner table where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her husband sat. What had started as a small act of rudeness was quickly becoming the evening's main event. The waiter, still smug from his earlier stunt, strutted between tables with exaggerated confidence. To him, the couple were just another pair of guests, ones he'd successfully humiliated without consequence. The idea that he might have disrespected someone important hadn't even crossed his mind. At Alexandria's table, her husband took a deep breath, trying to let the insult go. Al, he said quietly, you know, it's not about pride, but what that guy did was completely out of line. She nodded. You're right, but sometimes the best way to reveal someone's character is to give them enough space to show it. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were observant, sharp, assessing. Alexandria wasn't angry anymore. She was studying him, the way she might study a witness in a congressional hearing, patiently, but with purpose. The waiter returned to refill their water, and this time, his smirk was almost theatrical. Everything's still fine here, ma'am, he asked, tilting his head in mock politeness. Yes, thank you, Alexandria replied softly. Her composure seemed to irritate him. He expected her to snap back, to demand an apology, to create a scene he could mock later. Instead, her grace made him uneasy. Nearby diners were whispering more now. A man in a suit leaned toward his wife and murmured, that woman. She looks exactly like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. His wife frowned, glancing over discreetly. You think it's her? What would she be doing here in Chicago? Maybe she's visiting, he said. But if that's really her, that waiter's about to regret his whole career. A few tables away, a group of college students sat with their phones out, trying to confirm it. No way, one said quietly. That's totally her. Look, the same voice, the same smile. That's Ayok. The whispers started to spread like ripples on water. The waiter hadn't noticed yet, too busy showing off for a couple of regular customers. So, this lady, right? He said with a laugh, acts like she owns the place. Didn't even flinch when I spilled water on her. Probably doesn't want to pay for her meal. The customers laughed awkwardly, unsure how to respond. One of them, an older man, frowned. You sure you're not making a mistake? She looks like that congresswoman from New York. The waiter scoffed. Her? Nah. People like that don't eat alone without security. Trust me, she's no one special. Back at the table, Alexandria and her husband finished their meal quietly. The tension was thick, but she kept her voice even. He's digging himself deeper, her husband said softly. I know, Alexandria replied. And when truth shows up, it won't need my help. A moment later, one of the older servers, a woman with decades of experience, approached their table, leaning down respectfully. Excuse me, ma'am, she said softly. I'm terribly sorry for the way you've been treated. Some of us recognize you, and we're honored to have you here tonight. The waiter froze nearby, overhearing the words. His heart skipped. Recognize you? He turned slowly, confusion flickering in his eyes. Recognize her? What do you mean? He asked the older woman. The woman gave him a disappointed look. That's Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And the man she's with, but before she could finish, his face went pale. Wait, what? He stammered. No way. Now the other guests were watching openly. Some had already started recording. The once arrogant waiter suddenly looked small, lost, and deeply uncomfortable. Alexandria glanced up and caught his eye. She smiled, not mockingly, but kindly. That somehow made it worse. I'm guessing now you understand why respect should come before judgment, she said gently. The waiter opened his mouth to apologize, but no words came out. His voice cracked as he finally managed to whisper, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know, ma'am. Her husband folded his hands calmly. You didn't need to know, he said. That's the whole point. The restaurant had gone silent. Even the music in the background seemed to fade. Every person in that room could feel the weight of what had just happened, not because of power or fame, but because of how gracefully it was handled. Alexandria turned to the older server and said, Please don't blame him too harshly. We all make mistakes. Just help him learn from this. The waiter stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly. He wasn't used to mercy, especially not from someone he'd just disrespected. One of the diners whispered to another, She could have ruined his career right here. But she's teaching him a lesson without even raising her voice. Her husband looked at her with quiet admiration. You really are something else, he said softly. She smiled. Power doesn't mean yelling the loudest. It means knowing when to stay silent. Then she rose from her chair, preparing to leave. The manager, alerted by whispers, rushed into the room, out of breath. Congresswoman, we had no idea you were here. Please, let us make this right. But she stopped him mid-sentence. It's already right, she said. Just make sure no guest ever gets treated like they don't belong. Because everyone belongs somewhere. As she walked toward the exit with her husband, the entire restaurant stood still. No applause, no chaos, just quiet respect. The waiter lowered his head, realizing that her forgiveness had left a deeper mark than anger ever could. The story didn't end there. Within hours, one of the bystanders uploaded the video to social media. By morning, it had millions of views and 1,000 comments saying the same thing. That's how real strength looks: calm, kind, and unforgettable. If you were there that night, would you have recorded it or stepped in to defend her right away? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to share which city or country you are watching this story from. Let us see how far respect can travel. The sound of polished shoes striking marble echoed through the restaurant as the hotel manager rushed toward the dining area. He'd been informed by a hostess that something serious had happened, a guest humiliated, a scene unfolding. But he wasn't prepared for what he was about to walk into. As soon as he entered, the whispers began. There she is. That's really her. Is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Why isn't she saying anything? The manager's eyes followed the murmurs until they landed on the calm figure sitting at the corner table, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez herself. His heart dropped. He knew that face. Everyone did. The congresswoman, activist, and global figure who'd built her career on fairness, empathy, and justice, now sitting in his restaurant, her dress still damp from a waiter's arrogant stunt. Madam Ocasio-Cortez, he said breathlessly as he approached, bowing his head slightly. I didn't know you were dining with us tonight. Please accept my sincerest apologies for any inconvenience you faced. The waiter stood nearby, frozen. His face had turned pale, his once cocky grin now gone completely. Alexandria looked up with her usual composure. It's all right, she said softly. We were just finishing our meal. But the manager wasn't about to let it slide. Who was your server tonight? Before she could answer, the older waitress pointed toward the trembling young man standing behind her. It was him, sir. All eyes turned toward the waiter. The silence was deafening. The manager's voice dropped low, filled with disappointment. You served Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. Like that? The waiter swallowed hard, his voice cracking. I didn't know, sir. I swear I didn't know who she was. That's the problem, the manager said sharply. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. Alexandria gently raised her hand. Please, she said, stopping him mid-sentence. Don't be too harsh. He made a mistake and I think he's already learned from it. Her voice was steady, but it carried authority that filled the room. The waiter stared at her, unable to meet her eyes for long. Ma'am, I'm so sorry, he stammered. I was rude. I acted without thinking. I didn't realize, she smiled faintly. You don't need to apologize for not realizing who I am. You need to reflect on why you treated me the way you did in the first place. The entire restaurant went silent again. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. Her words hung in the air like a mirror, forcing everyone, not just the waiter, to think about how they judged others. Her husband leaned forward slightly. My wife believes in teaching lessons through grace, he said calmly. I hope you take this moment to remember that humility costs nothing, but arrogance can cost everything. The manager nodded quickly. Of course, sir. This was unacceptable. Please allow us to make it right. Dinner is on the house, and I'll ensure disciplinary action. But Alexandria interrupted once more. There's no need for that, she said gently. No one grows from punishment. They grow from understanding. She turned to the waiter again. I forgive you, she said quietly, but I hope this moment stays with you. Not to embarrass you, but to remind you that you never know who is sitting in front of you. Everyone deserves respect, no matter what they look like. The young man's eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly, whispering, Thank you. Thank you for your kindness. The older waitress smiled softly. You're lucky, she whispered to him. Most people would have demanded you be fired on the spot. The manager stood stiffly, unsure what to do. Madam, Mr. Ocasio, he began, if I may, we're deeply honored by your presence here tonight. I had no idea. Her husband rose from his seat and extended his hand. It's all right, he said. We own several properties under your chain, this one included. We'll be reviewing training standards soon. The manager blinked, completely stunned. You own? Alexandria smiled knowingly. That's why respect matters. You never know who's watching. The waiter looked like he might faint. His earlier arrogance now seemed like a lifetime ago. He stepped forward, voice trembling. Sir, ma'am, please, if there's anything I can do to make this right. Her husband shook his head. Just be better next time. That's all we ask. Guests all around the restaurant began to murmur softly, not out of gossip but out of admiration. They'd expected anger, public humiliation, maybe even a viral scene. But what they saw instead was grace, quiet, powerful grace. Alexandria stood and adjusted her dress, still slightly damp. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the guests watching her. I don't need special treatment, she said gently. I just hope this moment reminds everyone, whether you're a server, a guest, or an owner, that respect should never depend on appearance. There was a pause. Then slowly, the restaurant erupted into quiet applause. Not the loud, performative kind, but a respectful, heartfelt one. Even the waiter joined in, tears still in his eyes. As Alexandria and her husband walked toward the exit, the manager followed them to the door, apologizing once more. She turned to him one last time and said, Don't let this be a night of shame for your staff. Let it be a story you tell them to inspire change. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am, I promise. And with that, she and her husband stepped out into the cool night air, hand in hand. The stars above glittered like they were applauding, two soft reminders that dignity always shines brightest in the dark. Inside the restaurant, the waiter sat down in a corner, overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. The older waitress placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. See? She said kindly. Sometimes the people you look down on are standing taller than you could ever imagine. He nodded slowly, whispering, I'll never forget this. What do you think? Should Alexandria have let the waiter keep his job, or was forgiveness the right move? Type forgive or fire in the comments, and tell me what country you're watching from. The next morning, the golden sunlight slipped through the curtains of the luxury suite where Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her husband were staying. It was peaceful, birds outside, the quiet hum of the city below. But what they didn't yet know was that overnight, their quiet moment of grace had turned into a global phenomenon. At first, it started small, a short video clip posted by a diner on social media. The caption read, Waiter disrespects Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Her response left everyone speechless. Within an hour, it had 100,000 views. By the time they finished breakfast, it had crossed 5 million. The video showed the entire sequence, the waiter splashing water, Alexandria staying calm, the reveal, and finally her words, you shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. That single line spread like wildfire. It became a quote, a tweet, a meme, and finally a movement. News anchors debated it. Morning shows replayed it. Commentators praised her restraint, her grace, her class. The hashtags #respect before rank and #grace over anger trended across social media. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, chaos erupted. The manager's phone was ringing nonstop. Journalists called for statements. News vans were parked outside by noon. Inside, the young waiter sat in the staff room, head in his hands. He hadn't slept. Every major outlet had picked up the story. His face was everywhere, and so was his mistake. "I didn't mean to," he mumbled to the older waitress, voice breaking. "I just thought she was some random woman." She sighed and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't need to explain it to me, kid. You just need to learn from it. That woman gave you a second chance. Don't waste it." The manager entered the room holding his phone. "She posted something," he said. The waiter looked up nervously. What did she say?" The manager read aloud from Alexandria's official account. "We all have bad days. We all make mistakes. But we can choose what we do next: shame others, or teach them. I choose to forgive." The waiter blinked in disbelief. "She forgave me? Publicly?" The manager nodded slowly. "She did. You don't realize how rare that is. Online, people couldn't stop talking about it. A YouTuber posted, 'This is why Aok is different.' She didn't cancel him. She educated him," a popular news outlet wrote. In an age of outrage, one act of forgiveness stands out as a reminder of humanity. By evening, the restaurant's phone line was filled with calls from people around the world, not to complain, but to praise. Some even made reservations, saying, "We want to visit the place where that happened." For the first time, the manager smiled. "Even a mistake can bring light," he said quietly. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexandria sat with her husband in a quiet park. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, but she had it turned upside down. Her husband chuckled. "You're trending in 80 countries. Everyone's talking about what you said." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's not just about me. Maybe it's about how we treat people when no one's watching." He nodded. "You could have ended his career, but instead, you gave him a story he'll tell for the rest of his life." She looked thoughtful. "Forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It shows the world you refuse to mirror its anger." Later that day, a local news crew interviewed the waiter. He stood nervously before the camera, eyes red, voice trembling. "I made a terrible mistake," he said honestly. "I judged someone by how they looked. I thought I was being clever. But when I realized who she was and how kindly she treated me, I saw how wrong I was. I'll never treat anyone like that again." The video went viral too. People commented things like, "He learned something real. Respect to him for owning up. Aok just changed another life." Back in Washington, Alexandria's colleagues in Congress watched the story unfold. Some called her personally. One said, "You just turned an insult into a masterclass." Another wrote, "Only you could handle hate with that much grace." But for Alexandria, none of the praise mattered. That night, she sat by her window, reading through thousands of messages from around the world, people sharing their own experiences of being judged or mistreated. A young woman from Brazil wrote, "I was once denied entry to a hotel because of how I dressed. Your story made me cry. Thank you for showing that kindness still wins." A man from Kenya commented, "We all make mistakes. But the power of forgiveness, that's something rare." You reminded us of that. Have you ever been judged unfairly, maybe because of how you looked, dressed, or where you came from? Share your story in the comments below and tell me which city or country you're watching from. Let's see how far this message of respect can go. By midnight, Alexandria's quote had been shared millions of times. You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect. That one sentence, simple but powerful, was now printed on t-shirts, posted on billboards, and echoed in classrooms, workplaces, and homes. The next morning, she received a handwritten letter delivered to her office. The sender was the same waiter. Inside it read, "Dear Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you changed my life with your kindness. I've asked the manager to let me stay, not to hide, but to prove I can be better. Every time I serve a guest now, I remember your words. Thank you for not giving up on people like me." She folded the letter gently, smiled, and said quietly to herself, "That's what real change looks like." As the sun rose over the city, her story wasn't just about a rude waiter or a powerful congresswoman anymore. It was about something deeper, a reminder that dignity is a choice and kindness is power. If you believe respect should never depend on status, type respect in the comments and share this story to remind the world that kindness is strength. The morning after Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's message of forgiveness went viral, the world was still buzzing. News outlets from New York to Tokyo covered the story. Talk shows, podcasts, and even late-night hosts discussed the moment that had restored people's faith and decency. The headline everywhere read, "AOC responds to disrespect with grace turns humiliation into a global lesson on kindness." But no one was more nervous that morning than the hotel's executive board. They had gathered inside a sleek glass conference room at the company's headquarters. The CEO sat at the head of the table, flipping through the printed reports, social media mentions, press articles, and public reactions. "Gentlemen," he said gravely, "this is no ordinary PR incident. The woman our staff disrespected is married to the owner of this entire hotel chain." The room went silent. Every executive froze. One of them stammered, "You mean that waiter threw water at her?" The congresswoman, the CEO nodded, and her husband, our chairman, was sitting right there. A wave of panic rushed through the room. Managers started whispering, eyes wide. Another executive spoke up nervously. "What do we do? Fire the staff? Issue a statement?" The CEO leaned back in his chair. "No, we'll follow her lead." He picked up a remote and played the viral video again. The moment when Alexandria said, "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect," echoed through the room. The CEO paused the video and said quietly, "That line saved us. If she had reacted with anger, this company would have been done. Instead, she turned this into a lesson, and we will too." By noon, the hotel chain released an official statement. "We deeply regret the incident that occurred at one of our restaurants. We are grateful for Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's grace and understanding. Following her example, we will not terminate the employee involved. Instead, we are launching a company-wide training program on empathy, diversity, and respect." The statement went viral within minutes. People applauded the hotel's response, but even more, they praised the way AOC's attitude inspired change at the corporate level. Later that afternoon, Alexandria received a call from the CEO himself. "Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez," he began respectfully, "I want to personally thank you. Your words transformed how we're approaching this. We're renaming our new program in your honor, the AOC Initiative for Human Dignity." Alexandria smiled softly. "That's thoughtful of you. But make sure it's not just a name. Make it something real, something that changes how people treat each other." He replied, "That's exactly our plan." Meanwhile, the waiter, the young man who had caused all this, was quietly returning to work. He had expected to be fired. Instead, he found a new note taped to his locker. It read, "Mistakes don't define you, your next choice does." AOC, his hands trembled as he read it. He realized someone had printed her words and pinned them there for him to see every day. For the first time since the incident, he smiled. He started showing up early. He greeted every guest warmly, learning their names, their stories. When coworkers asked why he was suddenly so different, he simply said, "Because one person believed I could be better." Over the next few weeks, his change became noticeable. Guests complimented him. His manager reported his progress. And one day, the CEO himself visited the restaurant quietly, without cameras or media. He shook the waiter's hand and said, "You've turned a mistake into an example. Keep it up." The young man couldn't believe it. "Thank you, sir," he said humbly. That night, as Alexandria and her husband dined at the same restaurant, the waiter approached their table nervously. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I just wanted to thank you for not giving up on me." She looked up and smiled. "You didn't need my forgiveness to change. You just needed to see your worth." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'll remember that forever." The atmosphere around them grew emotional. Other diners who recognized the moment clapped quietly, and for a brief second, the restaurant that had once been a scene of tension became a place of healing. If you believe everyone deserves a second chance, drop A in the comments below. And tell us, have you ever had a moment when someone's kindness changed your life? Share your story, it might inspire someone watching from another part of the world. A week later, the AOC Initiative for Human Dignity officially launched. It wasn't just a company program anymore. Other hotels, restaurants, and even government offices began adopting similar training models. The initiative's message was simple: respect is not earned through status, it's expressed through humanity. Thousands of employees watched Alexandria's recorded message during their training orientation. Every guest, every coworker, every stranger deserves dignity. Not because of who they are, but because of who you choose to be. It was powerful. It was heartfelt. And it sparked something bigger than anyone expected. Soon, social media was filled with stories of employees across the world who had changed their behavior after hearing about Alexandria's forgiveness. Some called her a modern-day example of grace. Others said she turned humiliation into hope. But for her, it wasn't about fame or praise. When a journalist later asked, "What made you forgive him so easily?" she answered simply, "Because if I want the world to change, I have to start by showing what that change looks like." And with that, she smiled, thanked the reporter, and walked away knowing that somewhere out there, someone who had once made a mistake now believed in second chances again. Weeks passed since the viral incident, but the world hadn't stopped talking about it. What began as a heated moment inside a restaurant had become something much bigger, a global conversation about respect, forgiveness, and humanity. Every major news outlet ran follow-up stories. Documentaries were pitched. Schools started teaching the incident as a real-life lesson in character and grace. But what truly amazed everyone was how fast the AOC initiative for human dignity spread. Hotels in London, Paris, and Manila began adopting the program. Airlines reached out, asking to include its message in their customer service training. Even local community centers started hosting workshops with the same core theme: treat everyone with respect, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. Alexandria's quote was printed on posters, shared in classrooms, and written on walls around the world. In one heartwarming moment, a teacher in Kenya filmed her students reciting it aloud. The video went viral with the caption, "Even children are learning from AOC's example." Meanwhile, the waiter who had once been the symbol of shame became a symbol of redemption. Months after the incident, he was promoted to floor manager not because of pity, but because of how hard he worked to earn back respect. During an interview, a journalist asked him, "Do you ever regret what happened that day?" He paused thoughtfully before answering, "It was the worst mistake of my life but also the best lesson. Because of that moment, I learned the true meaning of humility." The clip went viral too. People admired his honesty. He became an example that change is always possible when you're willing to grow. As for Alexandria, she continued her duties as a congresswoman, but now her influence reached beyond politics. Invitations poured in from universities, conferences, and world forums asking her to speak about the power of grace. Yet, when asked about the fame, she always stayed humble. "I didn't plan any of this," she said during one interview. "I just reacted with kindness." Maybe that's what the world needed to see, that kindness can still win. Her husband, watching from backstage, smiled proudly. "You turned one ugly moment into a movement," he told her later that night. She replied softly, "No, people turned it into a movement. I just reminded them of what they already knew, that we all deserve dignity." Soon, international organizations reached out to collaborate. The United Nations even invited her to speak at a global summit on equality and compassion. Standing on that stage before thousands, Alexandria looked calm yet powerful. She began her speech with the same words that started it all: "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them with respect." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. But behind her confident smile, her message was simple and human, a message the whole world seemed ready to embrace. If you believe kindness can change the world, type respect in the comments and tell us which country or city are you watching this from. Let's show how far this message of humanity has reached. As the applause faded, Alexandria glanced toward her husband in the audience. He smiled, proud, not of her fame, but of her heart. And somewhere across the ocean, in a quiet restaurant where it all began, a reformed waiter looked up at the same quote framed above the counter, her words, engraved in gold: "Respect is not given to status, it's given to every soul." The story had come full circle. A moment of disrespect had turned into a lesson for the world. A mistake had turned into mercy, and one woman's grace had turned into a global movement for kindness.